Do, do, do. Josh Review! Yeah!
Welcome to another album review with me, Joshua Smith, and today we're going to be continuing our series of the Unholy Trinity of Katy Perry with her next album, which is Teenage Dream. This album was released on August 24th of 2010. A little chart information about it. It peaked at #1 on the US Billboard 200 and has gone double platinum in the US. It was released on the label Capitol, and the singles are California Girls, Teenage Dream, Firework, E.T., Last Friday Night, or TGIF, The One That Got Away, and Hummingbird Heartbeat. So, let's get this started. Now, track #1 is Teenage Dream. The first thing we hear on this album is some guitars that sound rather synthesized, with Katy singing very lightly and whispery. This song about living the young life and doing everything young people do, such as partying, falling in love, and all the quirks of being young, is a complete departure from what the previous album started out with, which was rock. This is all pop, containing all the elements of a pop song, with synth, drum track, and a catchy tune. It comes filled with sexual innuendo about being your teenage dream, even though Katy is obviously no longer a teen, but she manages to manifest that whole teenage persona rather well, especially on this intro track. This whole being a teenager and living the young life will serve as the theme for this album. Track #2 is Last Friday Night, or TGIF, Thank God It's Friday. This track seems to be a continuation of the previous track. It's like in Teenage Dream, the party's about to start and all the people are coming, and then on this track it's like waking up from a bad hangover from the previous night, and that's pretty much what this track is. It's about doing all this crazy stuff, such as skinny dipping, over drinking, having threesomes, passing out, dancing on tables, etc. It's a pure pop song, even having a saxophone solo from acclaimed saxophonist Kenny G. It's fast-paced with rapid lyrics non-stop. Track #3 is California Girls. This purposely misspelled track is an anthem to California because there's never too many of those. The first voice we hear is Snoop Dogg, who was featured on this track. But this pop-funk track has some great wah-wah guitar heard in the background, as it talks more about partying on the beach as opposed to going to bars or house parties like in the previous tracks. It describes what those beach girls look like, what they dress in, and their attitudes, which are, as the song says, unforgettable. After Katy finishes some verses, California native Snoop Dogg comes in with his signature rap style, making sexual references to grabbing the women, partying with them, and how there's nothing better than California. Now track #4 is Firework. A tad slower than the previous tracks, but not slow at all. This track deals with something less about partying and more about showing who you are and being confident in yourself. Packed with synthesized orchestra to add some flair, this track has some great vocal work done by Katy, as it sounds much more sincere and serious than the previous tracks, and you can hear it in Katy's voice. It's about making yourself shine like a firework and letting the whole world know that you exist, making yourself a star. This track could also have references to sex, such as the whole make 'em go leaves me questioning that notion. A great song overall, though. Track #5 is Peacock. If the last track had you questioning its sexual nature, then this track won't leave you questioning that notion at all. From a line like, "Let me see your peacock," you can probably guess exactly what this track is about. This track is mainly synthesized clapping drum beats and synthesized bass, with Katy singing, of course. As a song, it's rather immature, but for the sake of this album, it fits rather well, as it's about being young and dealing with all those things young people deal with, and being eager to experience sex is without a doubt one of those things. Katy takes on the role of a girl who has either never had sex before but is extremely eager to, or has had sex before and simply can't get enough of it. Definitely not one of the stronger tracks in the album, like the previous track is. Track #6 is Circle the Drain. Now we've come to something totally different from all the tracks in the album so far. This track is a rock track, much like her previous album, One of the Boys, which was mostly rock, as opposed to this album, which is mostly pop, as you probably well know now. This track is much darker than the previous tracks, as it makes reference to Katy dealing with a man who is addicted to drugs, saying she doesn't want to stick around for all of his antics and drug-abusing nature. She even swears several times using the F word to make her point clear, letting listeners know that she means business. Even the backing track is quite dark, with very ominous chord progressions, and Katy nearly yelling at this man that she's talking about. It's like this track is the dark side of what this album is all about, the reality of it all. That being a teenager comes with many dark parts to it, including those who abuse drugs, acting as if it's alright. Track #7 is The One That Got Away. Coming in with the pounding drum track, this track is about longing and yearning for someone that you love, continuing with the whole, mature theme. and dealing with less happy subjects of being young. Katy sings about how, in another life, she'd be his girl. She's saying she doesn't want to live in a reality where the only one she loves can't be with her. This pop track, albeit sad, has a very upbeat attitude and is very up-tempo. Track number 8 is E.T. or Extraterrestrial. This spaced out track, no pun intended, is so synthed up, it's out of this world, again, no pun intended. The main instrument on this one, of course, is the repeating single note synthesizer.
This strong track is about meeting someone who is so extraordinary that it's like he's an alien from another planet. Of course, it comes filled with sexual innuendo, which is to be expected, but compared to a song like Peacock, it feels much more intuitive as a song, as its structure is fuller with better references to sex as opposed to the simple, "let me see your peacock."
Track number 9 is Who Am I Living For? Yet another synthed-up track. It's actually less pop and more hip-hop, mainly because of its beat. It's something you could easily freestyle to with its pulsating bass and its drum track. It's a serious track where Katy is questioning herself as a person, wondering exactly who or what she's living for. It has a dark, ominous feeling to it, like most of the past couple of tracks have. By this point, it's quite clear that the album is slowly becoming less about parties and is almost a coming-of-age story. Track number 10 is Pearl, a deep track about a dysfunctional relationship. It's a sad story of a girl having everything going for her, being strong, independent, and worth something, but the man in her life is basically ruining her, taking away everything she loves, making her feel worthless. But she can't, wean himself away from him.
In this housey track, Katy is speaking in the third person. However, near the end, she refers to herself in the first person, so we can conclude that the entire time this track is going on, she's talking about herself, making it all the more sad. It's a song that's meant to be inspiring, as she's telling herself that she can be a pearl, beautiful, but she has to lose the anchor that's holding her back, her man.
Track number 11 is Hummingbird Heartbeat, and talk about synthed up.
This pop rock track is filled with that 80s style synthesizer sound as if we were listening to Van Halen's Jump.
Anyways, this track steps away from the dark, depressing themes and goes back to the sexual innuendos, and boy oh boy is this song filled with them. It's explicit, yes, but none of it's straightforward, as it decides to be smart and use double entendres to reference all of the sexual lyrics.
The reference to the Hummingbird Heartbeat is basically her heart racing fast like a hummingbird's during you know what. So after all those tracks about heartbreak and sad themes, we go back to what the album started out with. And even though this track is all about sex, much like Peacock is, it's still very smart about it, like E.T., as it doesn't just plainly state wanting to have sex, but makes references to nature, like how E.T. makes science fiction references.
Track number 12 is Not Like the Movies. This track opens with a beautiful muted piano melody and Katy singing quietly. As a matter of fact, most of the instruments are muted until the second verse.
This slow track is about wanting to live in a fantasy world, or in a movie, as the title suggests, where things always go your way in the end, and everything seems perfect. She talks about how sex isn't as exciting or as perfect as it comes off in the movies, or how relationships are nothing like they are in films. It's very somber and very sincere sounding.
So, with this track, we go back to how a lot of the album was in the middle. Track number 14 is Part of Me. Now, I know we skipped track 13, but all it is an acoustic version of The One That Got Away. So, as we move on, this up-tempo pop track has a serious nature to it, and is basically about staying strong, and how that strength is something that nobody will ever be able to take away from Katy.
It's about how a failed relationship should have left her broken and shattered, but it didn't, and she's still standing strong.
It's a great track that kind of cleans up all the tracks about being broken-hearted, and adds a bit of a parallel to it. It's kind of like she grew up after going through so many relationships, and now knows how to deal with the heartbreak as opposed to feeling depressed and broken about it. Track 15 is Wide Awake. This track, about literally waking up to reality, is a bit slower in tempo, and has more of a rock feel to it, but never losing that pop theme that stays rather consistent throughout the album. It's about maturing and growing up, no longer being a little kid who goes out partying and having sex with everyone. By this point in the album, it's quite clear that she's grown up, not only as a person, but as a songwriter and a musician. Final track, track number 16, is Dressin' Up. The final track from the album is, once again and for the last time, about sex. However, even though it's not as simple as Peacock, it's not as intuitive as E.T. or Hummingbird Heartbeat.
Instead of making references to things such as science fiction or nature, it's a song that has more themes relatable to BDSM. This is a pure party club track. Now, you may be thinking that with this track, she's reverting back to how she was in the beginning, with themes of sex when you finally thought she had grown up, but the opposite is actually true here.
In the beginning, she was just then experimenting and experiencing what it was like to have sex, but by this point and by this track, she was without a doubt grown up sexually. These themes of sex are darker and much more mature, much more adult and inappropriate. It's all these deep, dark sexual fantasies coming to life, and as the title suggests, she wants to dress up for her man and give him anything his dirty mind desires. Overall, with this album, I've stated this before, but this album is a complete and utter departure from her previous album, One of the Boys. It's a coming of age story about a teenager who thinks life is all fun and games, parties, and sex, when she soon realizes that there's more to it than just that. It's filled with heartbreaking, drug addictions, voyeurism, drinking problems, low self esteem, and ultimately we have to grow up and mature through all of it. It's all about her growing up, and it becomes a story many people my age or younger can relate to. The instrumentals and stuff aren't really anything to write home about, albeit certain tracks have certain things added to them that make them unique to the other tracks on the album. This album to me was marginally better than One of the Boys, and would foreshadow what the following album would entail. But anyways, thank you for joining me on this album review. I hope you enjoyed all the new stuff, the pictures, and the intro theme that I made. If you want an album or song that you like or may suggest for reviewing to be reviewed, just leave a comment down below and I will get to it as soon as I possibly can. Anyways, thank you for joining me, and so long. Also, happy holidays.